I was scrubbing away at a tough stain on the counter when my phone buzzed. The message was simple: "Be there soon, Mom." I smiled, drying my hands on my apron. My son, Ian, was as good as his word. At 18, he was already a man in many ways, always eager to help. I worked at a small laundromat on the outskirts of town, a modest but honest job, and today I needed his assistance to fix one of the industrial washers that had stopped working properly. When Ian arrived, the door chimes rang, and his familiar shape filled the doorway, broad-shouldered, with an easy confidence that had developed over the years. He had a tool bag in one hand and a knowing grin on his face. "You said you had a machine giving you trouble?" he asked, setting the bag down on the counter. "Machine number 3, I replied, pointing to the row of stainless steel machines. "It's leaking, and I can't figure out why." Ian knelt in front of the machine, the tools making a clinking sound as he worked. I couldn't help but watch him, amazed at how effortlessly he moved. He had always been quick with his hands, a natural problem solver in many ways. He reminded me of his father, though I didn't dwell on that much these days. As he worked, we fell into easy conversation, talking about his classes, his plans after high school, and the latest town gossip I'd picked up from my customers. He chuckled when I told him about Mrs. Granger accidentally washing her husband's phone again. "I don't know how you stay sane in here," he said, looking back at me. "The constant hum of machines would drive me crazy." "I don't mind it," I admitted. "It's predictable. There's something comforting about that." He grinned and shook his head. "You're something else, Mom." I leaned against the counter, watching as he tightened a bolt. "I don't know what I'd do without you, Ian." He glanced up at me, his gaze lingering longer than expected. "You'd manage. You always do." It was a simple exchange, but it carried a weight neither of us acknowledged aloud. We had always been close. After adopting him as a baby, I had raised him on my own. He was everything to me, and I like to think I had done a good job. But lately, there was a shift between us, subtle but noticeable. Moments felt heavier, more charged. I tried to brush it off as my imagination. "Done," he declared, standing up and wiping his hands on a rag. "Should work fine now, but let me know if it acts up again." "Thanks, sweetheart." I hesitated for a moment before asking, "Can I make you dinner tonight?" "It's the least I can do." He smiled. "Deal." Back at home, the kitchen smelled of roasted chicken and herbs. Ian sat at the small dining table, flipping through an old photo album I had left out. Every so often, he'd laugh or comment on a picture, his voice filling the quiet space. "You were so young here," he said, holding up a photo of me from my 20s. I glanced over my shoulder, laughing softly. "I was clueless. You don't give yourself enough credit," he said, his voice softer than usual. "You've always been incredible." His words caught me off guard, and I turned back to the stove, pretending to focus on the sauce. "Well, I had to be. I had you to raise." The table creaked as he leaned forward. "You make it sound like a chore." I shook my head. "Never. You were my biggest blessing." He didn't respond immediately, just watched me with an unreadable expression. Finally, he said, "I'm glad you think so." Dinner passed comfortably, filled with laughter and stories. By the time the dishes were cleared, the earlier tension had dissolved, replaced by the familiar rhythm of our bond. As he headed out for the night, he hugged me tightly, whispering, "Thanks for dinner, Mom." "Love you." "Love you too, Ian." I stood in the doorway, watching as he disappeared down the street. The cool night air brushed against my face, and I couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed between us. Not in a bad way, just different. Maybe for now, that was enough. The next morning, as I sat behind the counter at work, sipping warm coffee, my phone buzzed. It was Ian. His message was short, but it made my heart skip in an unexpected way. "Do you have another broken machine by any chance? Because I want to see you." I stared at the screen, reading the words over and over. A warmth spread through me, growing like a fever. The simplicity of it, the way he didn't bother with pretense, made me feel something I hadn't felt in years: exhilaration. I smiled to myself, thinking of his teasing nature and how much I enjoyed it. Impulsively, I typed back, "I'm stuck in the washing machine. Come and get me out." I hit send before I could second guess myself. It was ridiculous, but I knew Ian would get a kick out of it. Not even a minute later, his reply came, "On my way. Don't go anywhere." I laughed softly, shaking my head at his quick response. He had no idea I was joking, but I figured he'd realize soon enough. Within 20 minutes, the familiar chime of the doorbell rang. Ian strode in, his dark eyes scanning the room. "Mom," he called, looking around. "Are you serious?" I peeked out from behind the counter, grinning. "Gotcha." His gaze locked on mine, and for a moment, he just stared. Then a slow smile spread across his face, half amused, half exasperated. "You're unbelievable, you know that." Before I could respond, he crossed the room in a few quick strides. "You're in trouble for this one," he said, reaching for me. "Wait, Ian," I squealed, backing up, but it was too late. His hands found my sides, and he began tickling me relentlessly. Laughter spilled out of me uncontrollably as I squirmed, trying to escape. "Ian, stop! I can't breathe!" "That's what you get for making me rush over here," he teased, his grin widening. "Stuck in the washing machine, huh? I should have known." Somehow, I managed to grab his wrists, halting him. Both of us were breathless from laughing. He looked down at me, his face inches from mine, and suddenly the air shifted. It wasn't laughter anymore. It was something else entirely, quiet and charged, like the stillness before a storm. His hands rested on my waist, and neither of us pulled away. "I'm glad you called me," he said softly, his voice lower than usual. "I didn't really call you, though," I murmured, trying to keep the moment light, but my voice faltered. "It was just a prank." He tilted his head, his gaze locking onto mine with an intensity that made my breath catch. "But I like being here with you." Before I could say anything, Ian leaned down and kissed me. His lips were warm and tentative, as though unsure if I'd let him. But I didn't move. I couldn't. It felt like the ground beneath me had vanished, and all I could feel was him. The kiss was brief, just a soft brush of lips, but it was enough to leave me dizzy. When he pulled back, he searched my face, his expression uncertain. "Was that okay?" he asked hesitantly. I touched my lips, still tingling from the unexpected kiss. "Ian," I started, but I didn't know what to say. "I'm sorry," he said quickly, stepping back. "I don't know what I was thinking. I just—" "No," I interrupted, shaking my head. "Don't apologize." His eyes widened slightly, and for a moment we just stood there in the quiet of the laundromat, the hum of the machines, the only sound between us. "I don't know what's happening," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "But it doesn't feel wrong." A hesitant but genuine smile flickered at the corners of his mouth. "It doesn't," he agreed. The air between us felt electric, like we'd crossed some invisible line neither of us had seen coming. I didn't know where we would go from here, or how this new dynamic between us would unfold. But one thing was clear. There was no going back. That evening, as the laundromat's last customer left and I flipped the open sign to closed, my phone buzzed again. It was Ian. "Want to walk around the city? Maybe grab dinner? My treat." I smiled, biting my lip as a mix of nerves and excitement bubbled up inside me. His offer felt more like an invitation than a casual suggestion. "Sure," I typed back, "but it better be somewhere good." His reply came almost instantly. "I know a place. I'll pick you up after work." True to his word, Ian arrived right on time. I stepped out of the laundromat, the cool evening air brushing against my skin. He leaned casually against his car, his jacket slung over one shoulder, his easy grin lighting up the dim sidewalk. "You look great, Mom," he said, his eyes sweeping over me. His voice was warm, not just with affection, but with something deeper, something I wasn't quite ready to name. "You're just saying that because you want me to pay for dessert," I teased, trying to deflect the heat in his gaze. "Nope," he said confidently, pushing off the car and opening the door for me. "I've taken care of both dinner and dessert, so all you have to do is relax and enjoy." The drive was filled with music and laughter, and soon we were navigating through the quieter parts of the city. The streets shimmered beneath the streetlights, the night buzzing with a soft energy. He parked outside a small, tucked-away bistro I hadn't noticed before. Its exterior was inviting, the windows glowing with warmth, and the faint scent of spices drifted through the air. As we walked inside, I glanced around at the cozy candlelit atmosphere. "How did you find this place?" I asked. "I have my ways," he replied, winking at me and pulling out a chair. "But I wanted to take you somewhere special." After we settled in, Ian ordered confidently, surprising me. "2 of the chef's specials, please," he told the waiter, then turned to me. "Trust me, you'll love it." I smiled, admiring his self-assurance. When did you become such a gentleman? He shrugged, leaning back in his chair with his signature charm. I've had a great role model, he said, locking eyes with me. His words sent a soft thrill through me, making me look away, nervously adjusting the napkin on my lap. You're sweet, I said softly. Just honest, he replied. As the evening continued, Ian felt different than the boy I had known for so long. He was self-assured, attentive, and his compliments were thoughtful, not just offhand remarks. I don't know if I've ever told you this, he said between bites of the most delicious pasta I'd ever had. But you're the strongest person I know. I blinked, caught off guard. Me? Strong? Of course, he said, setting his fork down. You've always been there for me, no matter what. You raised me on your own, worked so hard, never complained. You're incredible, Mom. His words wrapped around me like a warm embrace, and I felt my cheeks flush. Thank you, Ian. That means a lot. He smiled, and for a moment, everything around us seemed to fade. It was just the two of us, sharing an unspoken connection in that cozy bistro. After dinner, we stepped outside into the crisp night air. The city sparkled around us, the streets quieter, but still holding a certain charm. Ian offered his arm, and with a laugh, I hooked mine through his. I feel like I'm being escorted by a prince, I joked. Well, it's only fitting, he replied, his tone playful but sincere. You're a queen. We wandered through the streets, stopping to admire twinkling shop windows and occasionally pausing to listen to street musicians. At one point, we passed a small park where the fountain sparkled in the moonlight. Ian pulled me toward it, insisting we make a wish. I laughed, but went along with it, closing my eyes and tossing a coin into the water. What did you wish for? I asked as we walked away. He hesitated, glancing at me with a soft smile. I'll tell you if it comes true. The rest of the night passed in a delightful blur. Ian's confidence, humor, and the way he looked at me made everything feel like a dream I didn't want to wake up from. By the time we returned to the laundromat to pick up my car, I didn't want the night to end. I had a great time, I said, turning to him before getting out. Thank you, Ian. He reached out, brushing his hand against mine. So did I. There was a moment, heavy and quiet, where neither of us spoke. He leaned in slightly, his gaze lingering on mine. My breath caught, and for a brief second, I thought he might kiss me again, but instead he pulled back with a soft chuckle. Good night, Mom. Good night, I replied, my voice barely above a whisper. As I drove home, the night played out in my mind, every word and look echoing in my thoughts. I wasn't sure where this new closeness between us would lead, but I couldn't deny how alive it made me feel. A new kind of happiness. The next morning, I woke up with a mix of excitement and nervousness I hadn't felt in years. Ian had texted early, asking if we could meet later. I want to spend more time with you, he wrote simply. Those words stayed with me, and I found myself spending more time getting ready than usual, paying attention to small details, like which earrings to wear or whether my sweater was too casual. It was silly, I told myself. This was Ian, my son. But the walk through the city last night had shifted something between us. I couldn't ignore the way he looked at me or how it made me feel, even if I didn't fully understand it yet. By the time I arrived at the coffee shop he had suggested, my heart was fluttering like I was meeting someone on a date. Ian was already there, waiting outside with his hands casually in his pockets. He looked effortlessly confident in his fitted jacket and dark jeans, his presence commanding in a way that made me pause. When he saw me, his face lit up. "Hey," he said, stepping forward. Without hesitation, he leaned down and kissed me, not on the cheek, but a soft, deliberate kiss on my lips. My breath caught as the world seemed to tilt slightly. It wasn't rushed or awkward. It was the kind of kiss that said everything words couldn't. When he pulled back, his dark eyes searched mine. "I've been thinking about that all night," he admitted, his voice low and steady. I was too stunned to respond right away, my thoughts tumbling over themselves. "Ian," I began, but he shook his head. "Before you say anything, let me talk," he said, taking my hand and leading me to a quiet bench nearby. We sat down, and for a moment he just looked at me, his expression a mix of seriousness and vulnerability. "I know this probably feels strange," he began, choosing his words carefully, "but I can't help the way I feel about you. You're not just my mom. You're this incredible woman who's been my rock, my inspiration. And lately, I've realized that what I feel for you goes beyond that." His words left me speechless, my heart pounding in a way that was both thrilling and terrifying. "Ian," I whispered finally, "this is so complicated." "I know," he said, his grip on my hand tightening slightly. "But I don't care. I've spent the last 2 years building a life for myself, proving that I'm capable and responsible. I've worked hard for everything I have, and I've never wanted anything as much as I want to be with you." I looked at him, really looked at him, and saw the man he had become. Ian wasn't just my son anymore. He was strong, intelligent, and confident in a way that few men were at his age. I had always been proud of him, but now I felt something else, something I was almost afraid to admit. "Every girl would dream of a guy like you," I said softly, trying to lighten the moment. "I don't want every girl," he replied firmly. "I want you." His words sent a thrill through me, one I couldn't ignore, no matter how much I told myself I should. We spent the rest of the day walking through the park, stopping to sit by the lake and talk. Ian told me about his YouTube channel, how he had grown it from a small passion project into something that not only paid his bills, but gave him freedom and confidence. He spoke about his plans, his dreams, and how he wanted to share them with me. "You've always been the one person who believed in me," he said, his hand brushing against mine as we sat on a bench overlooking the water. "You're my favorite person in the world, and I want you to be part of everything I do." His words touched something deep inside me, and I couldn't remember the last time someone had made me feel so cherished. As the afternoon turned to evening, Ian suggested dinner at a nearby restaurant. The meal was perfect, the conversation easy, and the way he looked at me made my cheeks warm. When we stepped outside, the cool night air brushed against us. Ian took my hand again, and this time I didn't pull away. "You're everything to me," he said, stopping under a street lamp. His gaze was steady and filled with emotion. "And I'll spend every day proving that to you, if you'll let me." I didn't know what to say. My heart felt full and conflicted all at once. But when he leaned down to kiss me again, I didn't stop him. It felt like a beginning, even though I wasn't sure where it would lead. All I knew was that, for the first time in years, I felt truly alive. And Ian was the reason why.